Welcome to another conversation between myself and Annmarie. Today we're here to talk about emotional intelligence, a really important topic for anyone listening in, whether you're a team member or a manager or a leader, or I would say a parent even. This is so important, and we'll share why it's important. And we'll also give specific examples of situations. I mean, I work with managers and leaders, and Marie does the same. So I think it's really helpful to look at situations where somebody perhaps lacks some emotional intelligence, and we can pin down what is it they can do differently. And personally, I've spoken and written quite a bit about emotional intelligence before, and I like to say that it's one of the key differentiators between a very task-oriented manager and a more transformational leader. So definitely something to look into. And of course, I'm excited to have Annmarie with me because Annmarie does a lot of work on this as well. So just before we get into a definition, I'm curious if, why you think this topic is so important.
Well, for me, I was one of those people who was a task-oriented manager and very, very good at that. And I can share more details about that later. So I had to learn about emotional intelligence the hard way, and it took me a long time to realize the importance of bringing people on the journey. And I also dive in and also sort of do a lot of presentations. So I dive a lot into reports and what are the most important skills right now. And so there's quite a few reports that show how high emotional intelligence is really important for successful leaders and successful organizations. And one of the reports, the World Economic Forum, shows that emotional intelligence is part of the top 10 skills that we need to be able to operate in today's environment. So we can share some of these reports in the links and get into more details later. Emotional intelligence is so important, I think, for everybody, just to be able to be aware of how you're showing up and to regulate how you're showing up and be able to move through life with grace and ease. So I think it's really important, especially in the world that we're in today, that's really chaotic. There's a lot of drama going on outside of our own individual world and the world outside us. There's a lot of drama going on within organizations, and being able to show up in a way that you can navigate those experiences and not get bogged down in them, I think is really important. And to me, that's emotional intelligence at work.
Well, I like how you say that you learned it the hard way, and I'm curious to know more about that as we progress here today. I also don't want to discourage people because emotional intelligence is a broad topic. It takes time, as you said, to learn it. But as we will also look at, it is definitely possible to build, and that's obviously why we're here and why it's so important for people. It's not a skill set we're born with perfectly, so we can definitely improve on it. And I want to throw in a definition of emotional intelligence, and I also want to mention Daniel Goleman because we often refer to him as the father of emotional intelligence. And the way I would just very briefly define emotional intelligence is that it's our ability to understand and respond to emotions in ourselves and others. And there is this dual aspect of EQ. One is understanding my own emotions and regulating my own emotions. And then I mirror that, right? And can I understand other people's emotions? We call that empathy. And can I use that to build conducive relationships? And again, looking at Daniel Goleman, and because I often use his framework when I teach this, or when I think about it, he has 4 major categories where he talks about there's the self-awareness piece, there is the self-regulation piece, and then when we look at the other person, there is the empathy, which is social awareness, and then there is the relationship management or the social skills. And we both, right, we both say that it all starts with this self-awareness. You can't build emotionally intelligent relationships. You can't self-regulate if you're not self-aware. Right. But I also want to bring in Marc Brackett. Marc Brackett is a professor at Yale, and he looks at emotional intelligence a little differently. I mean, it's still the same thing, but we all like different models, don't we, to look at reality. And he uses this acronym called RULER, which I thought was quite interesting. And I want everyone listening to maybe self-assess a little bit here, because there are 5 letters in the word RULER. And the R stands for recognizing emotions. So if you're listening right now, how good would you say you are at recognizing your emotions? The U stands for understanding emotions. The L is labeling emotions. You might think they're all the same, but they are actually slightly different. Then we have the E, which is expressing emotions, and R is regulating emotions. And I thought that was a very useful framework for him to speak to. And we'll come back to Marc Brackett a little later on. He's done some interesting work, and there is an app that he's championed that we're going to share with you as well. And as you said just a moment ago, Annmarie, there are quite a few statistics out there, and they all point to the fact that EQ in many ways are more important than IQ. And Daniel Goleman talked about this in his original book, Why EQ Can Matter More Than IQ. And some people say in these statistics that emotional intelligence has a 58% influence on job performance. I don't know if it's 58 or if it's 62. We can argue the exact numbers. Statistics might also say, or would also say, that 90% of top performers at work have high emotional intelligence. And I definitely have seen evidence of that. And then a very interesting one that actually surprised me a bit, and I'm keen to hear your view on this, Annmarie. Only 36% of people worldwide are emotionally intelligent. And I thought that was interesting, and I want your view on this. And I mean, I have this perhaps naive view that actually we're becoming more emotionally intelligent than previous, some decades ago. But what is your view on this?
So the statistics are really interesting, right? And the statistics that come from, I'm always interested in where they come from and what the context is. As we were preparing for this, I found a report that was new to me. I hadn't seen it before. And it's like the state of EQ. I'm not it's State of the Heart report from 2024. And so it talks about EQ. It's this assessment that's done on EQ, and it talks about EQ across the world and in different regions. And it's a fascinating report, but it does back up what you're saying about the 1/3 of the population is emotionally intelligent. And it talks about us being in an emotional recession right now. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. I usually like to look at multiple reports. That's just me. But this one report talks about us being in an emotional recession, and that emotional intelligence is declining slightly, like 5% year over year. And it goes into depth around how it links and correlates with well-being. So it's a really interesting report, and I think we can probably link it in so people can take a look at it, just as one perspective to be aware of. But the thing that jumped out at me as I was reading this report, because I often talk about the mental health statistics, and in some of my presentations I talk about stress and how we can move out of the stress situation. So when we're in stress mode, we're really narrowly focused on a problem, and we become hyper focused, and we tend to just drill way down, and we're not able to sort of see that bigger picture and see the forest for the trees. And so I think if you look at mental health over the last couple of years, the statistics show that mental health and well-being is decreasing. So it sort of makes sense to me that emotional intelligence would be decreasing in correlation with that, because as we are more stressed, where many people, when they're in a stress situation, have difficulty self-regulating, and they have difficulty being truly aware of how they're feeling and having that internal awareness that they need to shift. So it makes sense to me that emotional intelligence is decreasing, and that correlates with the state of mental health and the state of stress in the world, because I think those two things go hand in hand. And so I think that the work for us all is to maybe become aware of how we're feeling and be able to tap into, okay, let me pause. If I'm feeling that way, let me do something different, which is why I think this conversation is really important, and the types of the conversations we've been having through this series and the tools that we're giving through this series, I think are really important for people on a personal level to shift, regardless of what the global statistics are. This comes down to the personal level and how they shift it.
I just want to relate it to what we've been talking about in a previous episode about below the line, because what you're expressing there is, well, we're stressed, we're burning out, and if our mental health is decreasing, that means that we're dropping below the line, right? And I'm actually quite surprised, because we have so much focus now on mental health and well-being. So I guess it shows that there is really a big need for that. I mean, we're not here to talk about loneliness, but we do know that there is loneliness is a problem. So I don't know if we can conclude that yes, there is more focus on mental health and well-being, but not enough. You know, we need all the focus we can get, really.
Yeah, well, I think so. This is a bigger topic, and maybe this is a different conversation that we can, peg in our future. But I think the way we work actually affects our mental health. And so organizations have brought in these wellness programs, but it's not actually addressing the way people are working and the expectations placed upon them and the distractions and all of that. And that all plays into it. So I think we have to look at that, and we have to really create focus time for ourselves and take back to, we talked about this, I think, in one of our earlier sessions, taking personal accountability for how you feel and taking personal accountability for carving out time to develop these awareness and these tools for yourself, regardless of what's happening in your organization or outside of you. If you can carve out a little bit of time, even for people watching these videos, that's awesome, right? You're starting to carve out that time for yourself. And so that is really important, creating that focus time, creating that self-awareness, and just taking on that ownership for developing yourself and bringing yourself back to that level mindset, and recognizing where you are yourself and putting in your own personal time, regardless of whatever's happening in your organization, whether or not they're supporting those types of activities or not. You can help address it for yourself and be happier in your own skin.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're here, is to take empowered action, right? So to say, what can we do? And the good news here, of course, is that EQ can be improved upon at any age. It's not like we're born with a certain level of EQ. Thankfully, thank God, because I don't think that I was born with being perfectly emotionally intelligent, and I'm still not there. I like to say it's a life skill that we keep improving upon. And definitely I like to say my past life, when I was a very hardworking, very task-oriented project manager, I had a lot to wish for. So, whenever I think when I was disappointed or frustrated, I was not very good. Firstly, I knew I was frustrated, but I wasn't good at labeling it and saying, hold on, I'm aware now, I'm frustrated. What am I going to do here? I was too busy to want to do something about it. I thought it was normal. Maybe I thought I couldn't do anything about it. So I just suppressed it and just got on with it. And that meant that when I'm so frustrated and I don't work with that emotion constructively, it might come out in all kinds of ways that are not helping my project team and that are not helping my leadership style. And I have an example, actually, because I think it's really nice with these examples. And so imagine I'm working on a very big project. This is, let's say, 15 years ago. And we're not using Agile per se. I'm well familiar with Agile at this stage, but our project is progressing. We're doing quite well. Then Ben arrives. So Ben is a consultant, and our new manager, the whole head of IT, got Ben involved because we had to work more agile. And I wasn't particularly happy with Ben arriving because I didn't like the idea of some consultant telling me and my team how we should be working. I wasn't unfriendly towards Ben, but I kind of tried to ignore him, I think, because I didn't know what to do with my emotions around this. I didn't know why I had resistance. I just thought if I ignored him, he would probably go away. I mean, he was a consultant. And one day, Ben asked me if I wanted to go down to the coffee shop with him. I was like, yeah, sure, all smiles. And then he said, Susanne, I sense that you're a bit resistant. What's that about? And I was like, oh my God, he dares to talk about my resistance. He actually brought it on the table. And my heart completely melted, and I'm not exaggerating. And I became very good friends with Ben, and Ben is his real name, and we are friends. And he had this ability to notice what was going on in me and to be okay to talk about it. He didn't make a big issue out of it. He was just curious. And as we know, curiosity is one of the attitudes that live above the line, right? So my emotional intelligence has definitely improved over the years. Hopefully, this is something that comes with our maturity. But for me, of course, because I'm a qualified coach now, and I went on to study after this episode with Ben, that's something that's really improved my own ability to notice my own emotions and those of others. And I'm curious about your story. Were you born like a perfectly emotional, intelligent human being?
No, and it's so funny. I'm sort of standing here laughing as you're telling this story because I could tell very similar stories. And that's probably why we sort of resonate and connect, is because maybe we had similar backgrounds. I definitely was born a doer, and I sort of the oldest of seven. I've been hustling since I was yay high, right? And getting things done, really the do. And so when I was working in big corporations, I was known as the person who rescued projects, because I come in and just sort of cut through all the noise and cut through whatever drama was going on, got a plan in place, and then had everybody sort of march to that plan. And so, in the rescuing projects world, I really I cut through a lot of reasons and excuses that people had for why the project was in the state it was. And I was very much do, we can rescue this. And we got a lot of things back on the rails. And many cases it was because there was some managerial discipline missing from that action. And so I brought the managerial discipline. And you talk about the difference between a manager and a leader, in which I now talk about in my training as well, because I was a really good manager, really disciplined at getting the work done, getting it done really effectively, and getting it done with high quality. But I wasn't the best leader. So I didn't bring people with me on the journey. So, people's noses got out of joint really quickly, and, people complained about me, but, people tolerated me because I got stuff done. But at the same time, it didn't feel good, especially if you were outside my team, sort of working in the peers, or if you were maybe, God heaven forbid, if you were part of the people who were on the team that needed rescuing. I'm sure that didn't feel very good either in hindsight. So no, short story, no, not born that way. I am living proof, like you, that you can learn the skills. And I like to think that intellectually, I knew what it meant to be emotional intelligence. So when I was learning the skills over, post that experience, right, when I became more aware and realized I have to learn what was called soft skills back then, but I really don't like that term, soft skills. I call them power skills, like they're intrinsic power skills. And EQ is part of that. So intellectually, I learned what it was, so I could talk the talk, and I thought I was emotionally intelligent, but it took me the longest time, and really wasn't until I fully addressed my stress, and where I was bringing stress and fear into conversations, and really recognizing and sort of going through the programs that I've talked about in some of our last series, where I was really addressing that stress response in myself. That's when I shifted into being emotionally intelligent, because I wasn't driving forward from a place of fear or stress about what other people thought of me. I was really driving forward from a place of sort of more open and curiosity. And so instead of just sort of talking the talk and intellectually knowing what it was, I started being what it is. And like you, I think there are times where we dip in our emotional intelligence, but now I'm better at catching it. If I don't catch it right in the moment, I'll catch it shortly thereafter, and I'll course correct before it becomes a problem. Or I'll notice, when I'm not necessarily present, and I'll be able to force myself to come back. So now I think I've learned how to be emotionally intelligent. But again, I think it's ongoing, right? So you can learn how to be that, but it's something you need to keep cultivating and keep being aware of and keep growing and deepening. I'm not sure that journey will ever be done, but I am living proof that yes, you can learn these skills.
Sorry. Yes, no, it's good to I think for us both to show to people that yes, it's something that we learn. And also, yes, we can intellectualize it, as you said. We can have a conceptual idea of what emotional intelligence is, but at the end of the day, it's about emotions. It is about the feelings and noticing those feelings. And the other thing that I'm thinking as you're speaking there is that because there are so many different facets of emotional intelligence, it is very possible that somebody has high self-awareness, and yet then still not able to listen very well to others. I mean, I coach somebody and he knows that it's his learning objective to listen better. He's aware, he notices when it happens, but he still wasn't able to stop talking. And so we could obviously work with that. But so there are different facets, and maybe we move through those different aspects of emotional intelligence at different speeds. And I
Yeah,
like, sorry.
and different stages, right? Yeah, I think you build over time, right? And
Yeah.
I know in one of our future sessions we're going to talk about self-awareness. I think that's our next session. So we'll dive more into how to build that. But yeah, I think that's important.
And I want to continue with some examples because exactly for that reason, not to just be intellectual about it. So one example that I see a lot of, I might say, a manager who is not the most emotionally intelligent. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here because we're not trying to criticize anyone. But let's imagine that we are in the workplace, whether we are a project manager or not, we all have projects that need to get done. We all have stuff that needs to get done. And imagine that you've delegated something to a person and that person, for some reason, doesn't get it done. Could even be a client you're reliant on, even if you're not delegating to them directly. But you have an expectation, somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do. Most people will recognize the emotion of anger. Okay, so I get angry because I thought we had an agreement. So somebody who, let's say, could do with a bit more emotional intelligence, they might either just express that emotion and, show their muscle and get really angry and we all kind of running away from that. Or it could be the opposite. It could be that somebody, like I used to do, just suppress it and just move on as if nothing has happened. But I'm like silently resentful. Maybe there's a bit of passive aggression going on. I mean, this can express itself in many different ways. But either way, the person who lacks this emotional intelligence, to some degree, they don't know what to do with this emotion. They don't know how to express it appropriately. Because we're not saying we want to suppress it and never express, and we're not saying we want to express it 100%. We're saying we need to express it appropriately. So what would let's say, a manager do who has a higher level of EQ? Well, in the ideal world, they'll go, I notice that I'm angry right now. I'm really, really angry because we had a clear agreement yesterday and it's not getting done. I may not say that out loud, but the first thing, I'm noticing it, I'm labeling it, right? Yes, I am angry, or whatever the emotion is. And then there would be a bit of distance. This is ideal world, right? So there'll be a bit of distance where this person, this manager, doesn't react straight away. They kind of sit with it. Okay, how do I want to respond? What's going to be appropriate? Maybe I need to say to this team member, I do feel quite angry because we had a clear agreement, and I need to understand what happened. So let's sit down, and I want us to go through what happened because, number one, I don't want to make assumptions right now. I want to understand. And secondly, I don't want this to happen again. So that would be an example of a measured way of expressing our emotion. So we can definitely express our emotion, but we don't have to act out the emotion. We don't have to be the anger, even if we say that I'm angry. And I'm curious if you have any examples you would like to share.
Yeah, and I just want to call out because I think there's a couple of things that you said I think that's really important, and I want to make sure people catch, right? So noticing, labeling, and then thinking, oh, well, also what might I not be seeing? Is there something going on here that I might not be seeing? So creating that space to be able to think, I notice that I'm feeling this way. I wonder what the situation is, what's going on. Let me talk to the person with openness and curiosity. So I think that structure is really important. And those labels that you provided earlier, I think are really important to help someone really sort of recognize how they're moving through that situation. Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of client projects. And so, we're often on sort of big IT implementations that can tend to be quite stressful. And so I really try to set what I call a one team dynamic. And I really try to hold myself to account for being able to bring the right energy and the right balance to the team. And if someone's a manager in the group, I expect them to sort of bring that right sort of energy and constructiveness to what we're doing, and not necessarily just always being a positive Pollyanna, but just also being balanced and being aware of how they're showing up, which I think is so important if you're a leader in an organization. But I've got a couple of examples where a leader shows up in a way that's not that way, and maybe they're replying all on an email and they're really calling out, well, why did you make that decision, or why did you do that? I don't understand. Let's talk about roles and responsibilities. Are you allowed to make that decision? But they've copied like 10 different people from different departments on this email, and the words and the tone and the energy of their frustration comes through pretty clearly, right? So now it makes people feel, oh, like even if you're not the target, everybody else around that goes, oh my gosh, they shy away from it. Nobody wants to respond. And how that plays out on a call when, I don't understand, what are we here to talk about anyway? Can we just get back on track? Like things that are said really tersely, you can redirect something and say, hey, look, I just want a time check. Can we, is this the right topic for us to be having right now? Or should we go back to the original conversation? There's a way to be able to interject in a way that's much more balanced in conversations. But when you're expressing frustration and when you're frustrated and when you're interjecting into those meetings as a leader, you're sending a tone and an energy out towards the team that doesn't feel good for anybody. And people notice, and then people start to shut down because that energy has sort of this negative feel to it. And when people start to shut down, they become afraid, they disconnect a little bit, and they become afraid to share their opinion because it doesn't feel safe to share their opinion, and they're afraid of like what that might lead to. And so that creates an environment of distrust. And when you're in a situation where there's distrust, there's a lack of transparency. When there's a lack of transparency, people don't tell you the challenges that they're facing. So if you're a manager and you're trying to move a project forward and someone's not able to tell you that, hey, I didn't get that task done because my manager pulled me off and had me do this other thing, then you can't help support that person to get the task done. But if you're working in an environment where people feel safe sharing that information, hey, look, I got pulled off yesterday because this other thing came up, but I'm going to be able to do it today. Or, you know what, my manager says that this other project's a higher priority and I can't get to your stuff for 3 weeks. Then if you're in an environment where you know that, then as a manager, you can go off and speak to that person's manager and say, hey, help me understand the priorities and what's the impact of that versus this. And you can level set and better support that person to be able to do the work. So it's really important that as leaders, we show up in a balanced way and in a calm way and an emotionally intelligent way, because just the messages we're sending with our words, with our tone, with our energy, can be really destructive for the team. And I think this is why this is so important. And the other thing I will say is when you're in that situation, if people are not sharing transparent feedback and sharing their opinions and their expertise openly, then when you're making decisions, you're not going to have all the facts for decisions. So your decisions are weaker decisions and you don't even know it. So it's affected the quality of the work that you're doing and the decisions that you're making. And it has a real tangible impact in the ability to do the work. And it makes it harder. Everybody feels tired. Everybody feels more fatigued when they're in a situation and an environment that feels that way.
Yeah, and I just want to link back to what you said there, that and as leaders, managers and leaders, we set the example. So it's very important, to be aware, what is the example that I'm setting. And I want now to share a very specific tool, because we like to share tools. And it relates to the labeling of emotions, because as we're saying, that fundamental step is so important. Can I notice, understand my emotions? Can I label them? Not just broadly, it's anger, but also more specifically. That's a way to kind of build that muscle. And this is where we bring in Marc Brackett again. I spoke about him before, professor at Yale. And he actually also has an app called How We Feel that we may or may not show today, but we'll definitely link to it. But I'm actually going to share my screen because the tool that I'll share is called the Mood Meter. And it is essentially helping us to check in with ourselves daily. And tell me if you see my screen, Annmarie.
Yep.
So it's actually a very simple matrix that helps us to label our emotions. And I'm just very briefly going to speak to what you see here. Yes, it's a matrix with two axes, and on the horizontal axis, you see my level of pleasantness. So if I'm in the green and yellow, I have a higher level of pleasantness, and if I'm in the red or the blue, it is a lower pleasantness. So they're more what we might call negative emotions, even if I don't buy into the idea of a positive or negative emotion. And on the vertical axis, we've got high energy at the top and low energy at the bottom. So you see anything in the yellow, that's like high energy and high pleasantness. Yay, I feel motivated, inspired, happy, joyful, all good stuff, all good stuff. Good emotions that sit above the line, certainly, as we talked about before. The green area, well, I still have pleasant emotions, but they are lower in energy, so I'm more calm, grateful, chilled, relaxed, fulfilled. Yeah, nice emotions. On the other side, the red, we have high energy and low pleasantness. So this is definitely where our anger and frustration sits, along with a whole load of other emotions, stressed, furious even. And then the blue part, low unpleasantness and low energy. So this is much more the sadness and hopeless, lonely. Yeah, they're really sad words, aren't they? Disappointed. Disappointed doesn't sound too bad, but hopeless is a really difficult one. So we're going to link to these or this particular tool in below the video. And the idea here is for, if you want to work with this, if you want to try this out, you can print it out, or you can get onto the app, and we might just show what the app looks like. Annmarie, I'll stop sharing now, and maybe you can share. But essentially, the practice that we encourage everybody to get onto is to ask themselves, how am I feeling? What am I feeling? And try to be a bit more specific with your emotions. And here is the app that goes alongside it.
Yeah, and this, so I've been using this app for a while. I'm not as consistent with it, but it provides prompts multiple times per day to say, hey, how are you feeling now? And so like I'll just talk through how to do this. So I would say check in. It's got the 4 quadrants that you just shared. So I can say, oh, I'm feeling okay. I'm not, I'm sort of in the low pleasant energy. And here you can see it's got lots and lots of different examples set up around, well, how are you feeling? And it's got just a glossary of what those terms mean. And so, initially when you start to use this, you might go, I don't know how I feel. I guess I'm sort of feeling just at ease, or I'm feeling good. And so you have maybe limited vocab to really explain how you're feeling, because you're maybe not as in tune with it. So here I'm just going to select good, and I'm going to say, yeah, I'm good. But over time, I think you can learn to really deepen, well, what does good mean? And you become more in tune. So I think using this app is a great way. It sort of says, tell me what I might be feeling. You can skip through all of that, and then you can just hit save, and then it'll just add it into your analytics. And over time, you can say, you'll see the analytics of how you're feeling. So I like the app. It's free. It puts that grid into motion, and it definitely deepens your self-awareness around how you're showing up every day.
Mm,
So let me,
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
you can link that in as well.
And yeah, and with that, we're going to wrap up today's conversation. I want to thank everyone for engaging and remind you that it's only by taking action that you get new results, and watch out for more episodes to come. And with that, yeah, thank you, everybody. See you
All
next
right.
time.
Thank you. Bye.